Okay, so I'm going to try and go through demonstrating how to write a task one process in this video. So I'll give you a demonstration and then I will send you a different task one process task to look at and try and repeat the same thing. So let me share my screen to show you the task. Okay, so here's the task. It's the process of making instant coffee. That's important because the process of making coffee itself is quite simple and would probably not, it would be too simple to do in an IELTS process like this. So the key thing to look for here, as in all task ones, is the key sentence that they say in every task one: summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Now, in processes, this can be challenging because often, like in this case, the process is linear. It goes from step 1 to step 12 or whatever step it is, and there are no side steps, there are no simultaneous steps happening. So it gets very difficult to then say, well, it gets difficult not to write an essay which is simply a repetition of step after step after step after step after step. They want to see you doing some kind of analysis and identifying relationships between the steps, or which steps are more important than others, and referring to that. So if you have a process like this, which is linear, what you want to do is identify, yes, the number of steps, but more important than that, can you identify phases of production? So in this case, for me, I'm looking for 3, and that's for the same reason as every time we do a task one writing. If you are dividing your main information into 3 main parts and reporting that over 2 paragraphs, you are deciding which of your main parts you're going to report together, and that is comparison, that is showing analysis. So we want to take the data and we want to divide it into 3 phases. So how would we do that here? For me, one obvious place to put a break would be here, from the basic coffee beans to the ground coffee beans. And then possibly from here onwards. Now, the reason for that is that the first 4 steps, the coffee bean is intact, it is whole. In the second step, the coffee bean is ground and a liquid is made. And the third stage is about the processing of that liquid. Other ways you might want to do it would be to do with, you might say the last one, for example, is a kind of a packaging process. So this step 3 could be a phase on its own. You might say, for example, well, you could say step 1 is a phase on its own as well. So these are about the raw ingredients. The middle phase, which is quite long, it contains a lot, and obviously you'll say a lot about that. That's all about the mechanical processing. And the last phase is like preparing for retail. That's another way to do it. You might also say, you might divide it according to you might divide it according to levels of water, for example. So similar to what we did initially, wasn't it? The first step is collecting the beans intact, up to grinding the beans. Then you have liquid coffee, the second step, which is then ground, and then the water is removed in the third step. So you might say that's 1, 2, 3. However you do it, you want to find a way to not just report step after step after step after step after step, be more analytical, and you do that by looking for phases in the production. Okay, I'm going to do it, I think, the way I suggested first. So we're going to talk about whole beans, what happens to them. We'll talk about what happens to the liquid that we make. Step 1, step 2, and then we'll talk about the last step together. Now I need to decide which of my 2 phases I'm going to report together. To me, the most natural way to do this would be to talk about step 1 or phase 1 and phase 2 together, and phase 3 on its own. So let's go into a page which has disappeared, and I'm going to start writing. So I'm going to write 3 paragraphs overall. In my introduction, I'm going to paraphrase the question. Then I'm going to give an overview, and my overview can simply be a description of how I have divided the data over steps and phases. So let's go straight into it. Paraphrase the question. The question says the diagram shows the process of making instant coffee. I'm just going to say the diagram illustrates. That's all you ever need to say. If they say the diagram shows, you can say the diagram illustrates. If they say the diagram illustrates, you can say the diagram shows. The diagram illustrates. Okay, they say the process of making instant coffee. How instant coffee is produced. Fine. Overall, there are 11 steps which take place over 3 phases. Processing of the whole bean, or let's say sourcing, processing of the whole bean, production and processing of liquid coffee, and preparation of liquid, let's say, and drying of liquid coffee, shipment. Okay, so there's my introduction. I've done 2 things. I've said, I've paraphrased the question, and I have given an overview by saying how many steps there are and what phases those steps are divided into. So I'm going to go into my first main body paragraph. This is going to be slightly longer than the second, because I'm going to talk about the first 2 phases of production, right up to the point where we grind, where they grind the frozen liquid. Just a side note to say here, the language that you are showing off most, the grammar skill that you're demonstrating most in any type of process, actually, no, sorry, in almost any type of process, is the passive voice, right? The passive voice is what you want to show in processes. Now, sometimes you'll see things like, for example, the process of hydroelectric power, for example, and the first stage of the process is rain falling and rivers flowing. Now there you don't want to use the passive voice because you can't say rain is fallen or rain is dropped from the sky. There's no agent doing that. But as soon as you get into the human stages, for example, the water is collected and then the river is diverted and water is pushed through a turbine. The turbine or electricity is carried to the blah, 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 whatever you want. When you talk about the human aspects, the human parts of that process, you want to use the passive voice. So let's go straight into it. The first step is picking the beans. That is a human part. So in the first phase of production, raw coffee beans are picked and dried. I'm using the present simple passive there. Before, now I'm going to show off another use of the passive following a preposition. Before, it's a preposition, so if I use a verb afterwards, I'm going to use it in the ing form. So before being roasted, next process. This is like a topic sentence, right? So I'm saying the next step in the next phase of production. Next, the roasted beans are processed. Firstly, they say rapidly cooled. How else could I say that? They are cooled quickly and then ground. The resulting powdered coffee is mixed with water and strained to make the traditional liquid coffee consumed. To make traditional liquid coffee. Okay, my news phase is about how you take this liquid coffee and you turn it into this freeze-dried coffee that we're talking about. So, let's have like a topic sentence which tells me what the phase is about. In the next phase, fresh liquid coffee is converted into a transportable storable frozen pressed into a vacuum where they are dried. Okay, and that brings us up to 142 words. I think the natural thing to do then is just to boost it at the end by saying something about what will happen with this coffee. Shipped for retail. Consumers simply add boiled water to hydrate the granules and produce liquid coffee. 58 words. So let's just have a look through and check. What have we done? We've divided the steps into phases. We've stated what those phases are as we go through. We're using a lot of sequences. Firstly, next, after that, the resulting coffee. Those are sequences which show the steps that you're using. This helps to boost your word count. Above all, passive voice is the big skill that you want to demonstrate with processes. And normally, if you're talking about a manufacturing process, is going to be present, simple, passive. You may want to look at the question, because if it's, for example, the process of production of a historical commodity, or how the Egyptians made bread, for example, you're going to be using the past simple passive. So do check that. Mostly it's going to be present simple though. And look out for processes where you have simultaneous steps. For example, the process divides into two phases, or the process divides and two steps happen simultaneously before rejoining or something else. All of that will help you to decide how you divide your steps into three main phases, and use that to elaborate your answer. I hope this makes sense. Do send me a message or give me a call if there's anything you don't understand about it.